All right, everyone get ready because we are diving headfirst into some seriously thought-provoking material today. We're taking on Le Passage du Nord-Ouest, that's the Northwest Passage.
By Michel Serres.
Right, by Michel Serres. This French philosopher, let me tell you, he had some really interesting ideas about how we connect different areas of knowledge, or how we don't connect them, as the case may be.
And the way he uses this image of the Northwest Passage, it's so powerful. You know, you get this immediate sense of exploration of a journey, but not just any journey. It's like,
this is serious business.
yeah, it's treacherous, it's icy, uncharted territory. This is not a walk in the park.
We all kind of assume knowledge is connected, right? Like there's this big unified theory of everything out there. But Serres is saying, not so fast. He's suggesting it's more like navigating an obstacle course through icebergs.
And you know what's fascinating is he wrote this back in 1980. And if anything, I feel like his point is even more relevant today. Just look around. Everything's so specialized now. We have all these experts who know more and more about less and less.
It's like that saying, they can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
But Serres, he takes it a step further. There's this one quote that really stuck with me. Those trained in sciences are trained to forget men, their relations, their suffering, mortality.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's saying that the process of becoming an expert, you risk losing sight of the human element.
Yeah, the bigger context.
Yeah.
Why does any of this matter? It's not just that the connections are hard to make. It's like we are being actively discouraged from even trying.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Serres doesn't just leave us stranded in this icy archipelago of knowledge. He introduces this idea of the parasite.
Okay, so now when we hear the word parasite, we think, something negative.
Mm-hmm.
But he's actually using it here to describe...
This is a very specific Serres definition.
Exactly. It's somebody who can thrive in those in-between spaces, someone who can bridge those seemingly impossible gaps between disciplines.
So this is like the rogue scholar who defies categorization.
Exactly.
Okay, so these parasites, if they're so rare, how do the rest of us even stand a chance? How do we find those passages ourselves?
Well, Serres gives us some clues, and it starts with really taking a hard look at how we think, how our minds actually work. And to help us with that, he takes us on another journey, this time with a familiar face, Zeno of Elea.
Zeno of Elea. Okay, I'm not going to lie, when I hear that name, I instantly think about those mind-bending paradoxes.
Tell me about it.
About motion, like Achilles and the tortoise. It's enough to make your head spin.
Right. And that's the genius of Serres. He takes this figure, Zeno, who's known for these thought experiments, the ones that kind of make you question if movement is even possible.
Right.
And he turns him into this guide for us to help us navigate this complex world of knowledge.
Okay, now my mind is officially twisted. So how does Serres use Zeno? It's not like he actually has Zeno, like, out there solving physics problems or anything.
No, not at all. What he does is he imagines Zeno on this journey. But instead of just walking in a straight line, Zeno's constantly shifting scales. It's like he's looking at a map, right? But he keeps zooming in, zooming out, trying to understand how all those different perspectives fit together.
So kind of like how we use Google Earth today.
Exactly.
We can just seamlessly zoom in from like a global view, then boom, street level. We take that for granted, but that ability to shift scales, it changes how we see things.
Absolutely. That's what Serres calls transscalar thinking. It's this idea that no single perspective, no single level of detail can ever truly capture the whole picture.
So we need multiple maps.
We need multiple maps. You wouldn't use a world map to navigate like downtown New York City.
Right.
And you wouldn't use a city map to, understand global trade routes.
Mm-hmm.
Each map has its purpose.
Okay, that's a good way to think about it.
And he takes this idea even further with this fascinating concept, the coastline paradox. Have you ever heard of this one?
Wait, is this the one where if you were to try to measure a coastline, like for real, the closer you look, the longer it gets, because you're measuring all the tiny little inlets and curves?
Exactly. And Serres uses this to illustrate how knowledge itself works. It's like the more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. Every answer just leads to more questions.
It's kind of like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. But instead of getting bummed out about it, Serres is saying we should embrace it. Like this endless, ever-expanding nature of knowledge, that's a good thing.
It's about finding the excitement in the unknown, in the fact that there's always more to discover. And this isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. This has real implications for how we approach any fields of study, any complex problem.
Okay, I'm with you. So how does this transscalar thinking, this embracing of complexity, how does that actually work in the real world? Let's take something like science, for example.
Oh, that's a great example. We often think about science as this pursuit of absolute truth, of finding the single right answer. But Serres is pushing back on that just a little.
He's not saying science is wrong, right? Because, full disclosure, big fan of the scientific method here.
Oh, absolutely not. He very much respects the scientific method. What he's doing is pointing out the limitations of our traditional scientific models, particularly when dealing with things that are inherently complex and ever-changing. Think about fields like ecology or climate science.
Right. It's not just about isolating one variable in those fields. You have to look at how everything interacts.
Exactly.
And how those interactions are constantly shifting.
Exactly. And those are exactly the kinds of areas where Serres' ideas become absolutely crucial. He's saying if we want to solve the really big problems facing humanity, we need to move beyond reductionism. This idea that we can break everything down into its smallest parts and then boom, we've got it all figured out. It's just not that simple.
It's like instead of just looking at individual trees, we need to understand the entire forest, how it all works together, how it interacts with the environment, how it changes over time.
Precisely. And that requires a different way of thinking, one that really embraces complexity, that looks for connections across different scales, different perspectives, different disciplines. It's about seeing the whole picture, not just the individual pieces.
Okay, so we've talked about space, this whole idea of knowledge as this vast archipelago that we have to navigate. And we've talked about scale, how we need to be constantly zooming in and out to truly grasp complexity. But there's another crucial dimension to all of this, isn't there? The dimension of time.
Absolutely. Time plays a critical role. And, Serres, he's not going to let us off easy with some simple, straightforward, linear view of time. Oh, no. He had much more interesting ideas about that.
So we're back to journeys and exploration. But this time, it's through time, right? And Serres is like, forget your nice, neat timelines.
Yeah, he was all about shaking things up. Like, take Copernicus, for example.
Right.
We think of him as this revolutionary, right? The one who overthrew the old geocentric model, put the sun at the center of everything. But Serres is like, hold on a minute. Let's not forget everything that came before Copernicus.
Right, like all those centuries of observations, the debates, the slow, gradual accumulation of knowledge that had to happen for that aha moment to even be possible.
Exactly. It's like Copernicus gets all the credit, but he was standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, just like Newton said. But Serres takes it even further. He has this whole thing about the different phases of how knowledge actually develops. It's fascinating.
Yes. The metaphor he uses is a curve, which I always found so helpful. We often talk about progress as this exponential growth, this straight line upwards. But Serres is like, not so fast. There's a curveball. There's a curve. He says there are these three distinct phases to it. So first, you have this burst of discovery. Things are moving fast, new findings. Everyone's super excited. You're climbing the steep part of the curve. Think about like the early days of the internet or the Human Genome Project. That kind of energy.
I love that early stage. So much possibility, but it can't last forever, can it?
Right, and that's where phase 2 comes in. Things start to level off a bit. Now, scientists and scholars are trying to wrangle all this new information, organize it, make sense of it. You get these massive textbooks, right? These attempts to create a unified theory of everything.
Which, let's be honest, nobody actually reads cover to cover. There's just too much.
There's too much. And that's when you hit Serres' third phase, diminishing returns. This is where you're putting in more and more effort, but the gains are getting smaller and smaller.
It's like trying to squeeze water from a stone at that point. It can feel kind of demoralizing, right? Like, why even bother?
And this is where Serres really challenges our assumptions about progress. He uses the example of the Concorde jet, this amazing feat of engineering, right? But did it revolutionize air travel the way people thought it would? Not really. And it came at a huge cost.
So it's not just about progress for progress's sake. There's a point where we need to step back and be like, what are we actually trying to achieve here? And is this the best way to do it?
Exactly. And that brings us right back to Serres' central question. À quoi bon? What's the point? He's not saying we should give up on knowledge or progress, but he is asking us to be more mindful, more critical.
To not get so caught up in the excitement of the new that we forget to ask why in the first place.
Exactly. And I think that's such an important lesson, whether we're talking about scientific research, our work, our personal lives even. It's so easy to get swept up in the thrill of new discoveries, new technologies. But Serres reminds us to pause, to reflect, to ask ourselves, what's the point of all of this? What are we ultimately working towards?
So as you're going about your work, your research, your everyday life, keep exploring those seemingly separate islands of knowledge. But remember to bring Serres with you. Ask those tough questions. Look for the hidden connections. And maybe, just maybe, by asking that simple question, Akobo, what's the point, you might find yourself charting a whole new course, one that leads to a more meaningful impact.
And sometimes that new course might involve stepping back, consolidating what we've learned, and asking ourselves not just can we, but should we?
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the fascinating world of Michel Serres. But trust us, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole ocean of knowledge out there just waiting to be explored. So keep asking those tough questions, keep making those connections, and until next time, happy navigating.